So the latest news is that 40 British nationals have landed in Cyprus, taken out from an airport north of Khartoum by an RAF plane, and they're hoping to get another 260 out overnight. But I'm guessing once people leave their houses in Khartoum and make their way unescorted to the airport, that must be an incredibly dangerous thing to do. And I just wonder, is this a bit like Kabul? Have we dropped the ball once again? There was supposed to be a 72-hour ceasefire, but apparently that's been broken too. So it seems to me that with the French and Italians and the Spanish managing to get hundreds of people out before we'd even made a move, it seems to me somehow that our Foreign Office and our civil service, yes, that civil service that forced the Deputy Prime Minister out of his job a few days ago, it seems to me that they may well have dropped the ball. Well, somebody who's been studying and writing about this is Mark Almond, who joins me from the Crisis Research Institute, Oxford. Mark, is this Kabul all over again? Have we simply dropped the ball?
Yeah, unfortunately, it does seem that the Foreign Office doesn't learn from its past mistakes. What happened in Kabul was in a similar situation. The Taliban were advancing, there was a state of war around the airports and so on. But there was a much bigger force already there, the Americans and the British. But things went badly wrong. All sorts of people were allowed onto planes who shouldn't have been allowed in, and all sorts of people who had served Britain, either had British passports or had been interpreters and helping the British Army, were left behind. What we see now is that there was no planning in advance. This situation in Sudan has been bubbling away for 3 years or more, and certainly over the last few weeks. But it turns out that the key players in the Foreign Office were on holiday from the embassy in Khartoum, and the kind of ethos of working from home, even working from the holiday home, is something that doesn't work in the home civil service at all well. And certainly you need people on the ground, and you need planning. Why didn't they learn the lessons of Kabul and have an evacuation plan in place, which even the Irish and countries which we don't think of as playing a military and international role were able to have for their citizens? Now, we have many more people in Sudan for all sorts of reasons, but nonetheless, we have got 40 people out to Cyprus today. That's mercifully a very good thing, but it's a tiny number of the potential people who need to be rescued if this internal fighting continues as it seems to be.
Yeah, I mean, leadership and planning, of course, absolutely crucial. And in Kabul, of course, the British ambassador did play a pretty heroic role. He didn't leave. Yeah. He stayed there right to the very end. And as you say, the British ambassador to Sudan came back to this country on holiday over Easter, and he hasn't even returned. I mean, this is like the captain abandoning the ship. We've managed to get out all the diplomats, and frankly, it seems that everybody else can just fend for themselves. Don't the British government feel any sense of responsibility towards these people?
Well, this is a problem. We see, for instance, that the Army, the Air Force, and now the Navy have responded to the crisis, but they should have been got ready before this. It's not their fault. It's the fault, really, of the Foreign Office. And too many people in the Foreign Office have been spending the last 48, 72 hours briefing that they've done all they could have reasonably been expected to do. A lot of energy has gone into that, not actually into trying to roll back the problem. And all sorts of people in Khartoum have pointed out that you have to call the British government's call centre. Now, most of your viewers are used to trying to get through to a British government call centre about domestic matters and know how futile it is. When you have the local internet, the local telephone service broken down, interrupted by fighting, then, of course, it's a rather ridiculous idea. And so a lot of people in Sudan who had presumed that the British government would have some kind of contingency plan find themselves left to scrabble for an escape route.
No, it's awful. It's awful. Mark Almond, thank you very much indeed. Well, Mutaz Ahmed is the associate comment editor at the Daily Telegraph and comes from a family from Khartoum. And Mark there at the end basically saying, and you wrote a very passionate piece about this in today's Daily Telegraph. As I understand it, some of your family decided to ignore the advice and got out.
Yeah.
But you've got other family members that you think are still there.
I was texted or Instagram messaged by my cousin 30 minutes ago that he had to turn back, return to his home in Khartoum because the route isn't safe. This is part of the problem with having an airbase outside of Khartoum. Someone who has to get there must go through the war zone, through the checkpoints to get there, and we're assured that there's a 72-hour ceasefire, but it's not holding. There's lots of violence. And we're told the ambassador's working very hard.
What, from home?
From home in lovely Wimbledon. It's a great place.
You couldn't invent this, could you?
And we're told he's working 20-hour days, and I'm sure he's working very hard. And he's allowed to have holidays, and he went away for Ramadan, which is sort of understandable. But his deputy was away at the same time. Their head of security was away at the same time. And the person left to take charge of consulate affairs was the director of development, basically the guy who hands out British aid. Ambassadors, deputy ambassadors are trained to be there when there's gunfire.
The captain of the ship.
Well, exactly. And it isn't just about Sudan. If you're a British citizen travelling to parts of the third world, you'd expect, we're a big country internationally, and you'd expect there to be support. But no, my cousins had to turn back.
Right. So how worried are you about family and friends? Well, is this, and it's difficult for us to get a real feel for this. I mean, obviously, your family, your history, you've watched this destabilisation that's been going on. I mean, are we on the verge of an all-out civil war?
Yes. The battle lines have been drawn. But there's also this misconception that it's quite understandable, that because Khartoum is in a state of war now, it has always been a dangerous place. That's not true. It's actually been a haven of peace in the region where migrants from Ethiopia, Chad, Kenya, so on, stay. Wars have occurred in other parts of Sudan, but that was conducted by the government in Khartoum that essentially implemented a security state that kept people safe. So the people there are not used to war. My cousin, who has one passport, which is British, his parents are from Sudan, who, you'd normally see riding a bike on the road, not with a hoodie, but, who hasn't seen this sort of violence before, is having to sort of find a way of working through this to get to an airfield that isn't even in Khartoum.
But initially, he was advised by the British government to stay at home.
Yes.
Just as the people in Grenfell Tower were told to stay in their flats. And it strikes me this advice is just about as bad.
Yeah. He was told to stay at home while not even British citizens, Sudanese nationals, by the thousands, left the city and went to safety in Egypt. British citizens were told, don't go with those guys, stay at home. This morning, the advice from the Foreign Office was, please do not come unless you're contacted to go to the airfield that we've now based our operations. That advice changed within hours to please just make your way to the airfield. There's no connection in Sudan. There's no internet connection for most people. If you don't have someone in London sort of fighting your case, you wouldn't know that advice had changed and that essentially you're eligible now for an evacuation.
We've got a few out, 40 out, another 260 overnight, but it does look pretty tough, doesn't it?
40 out.
I mean, 1%.
The French got 500 out yesterday. Look, it's a very tricky situation, but there will be British charity workers in Sudan. I fear that people who are clearly not of Sudanese origin, i.e. white charity workers who are British, may be targeted, right? If this war and the ceasefire looks like it's breaking down, if the violence erupts, they will be targeted.
Very concerning. Mutaz, thank you. We wish your cousin really well, we really do, honestly. But it sounds like a horrible, horrible situation.
Thanks.